Let's go to Perth, Australia, and speak to Alexey Muraviev, Associate Professor of National Security and Strategic Studies at Curtin University. Great to see you, Alexey. If unity is critical to the pro-Ukrainian coalition, has Schultz consulted with other EU leaders here, do you think, before making the phone call, or has he maybe broken some sort of unwritten protocol?
Well, according to the German chancellor's office, there's been a consultation prior to him making a phone call. He consulted with his counterparts in the UK, in France, and he also alerted Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky of his intent to call Putin. So, if and I don't have any doubt to not to believe this information. So clearly, there's been a prior agreement that Scholz would initiate these direct conversations with the Kremlin, which were obviously suspended after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But as your previous report has highlighted, whilst the Ukrainians were informed of the phone call, clearly Zelensky has expressed concern and disappointment because it is effectively a way of establishing direct conversation with the Russians, bypassing the Ukrainians.
Do you think it's as much a domestic issue now for Berlin because of elections that are coming up in the next few months, or is Berlin still focused very much on the foreign policy challenge here of what's happening in Ukraine?
I would probably say it's a mix of both, because on one hand, the sanctions on Russia and the performance of the German economy are taking its toll. The fact that Germany no longer enjoys uninterrupted supply of Russia's cheap energy resources obviously have taken its toll on manufacturing industry. The Germans, including the German, for example, car manufacturing market, has lost access to Russia's lucrative market, including manufacturing capability inside of Russia. Germany was once one of Russia's principal European trading partners, and now this level of trade has dropped considerably, which obviously has an impact on Germany to some extent. There's been a rise of conservative, right-wing, nationalist-oriented parties that continue, like Alternative for Germany, that continue to advocate for the peaceful resolution, for a political resolution in Germany. And that's been a massive disappointment for the coalition that is currently led by Olaf Scholz. So he's taken this into account. Internationally, he recognizes that with Trump now coming into the White House, he would want to burden share the expense for their continuous support for Ukraine, which will eventually fall on Europe's hands. And by default, it would become Germany's problem, the UK problem, the French problem, and clearly the European Union, including the locomotives of the European economy, such as Germany, cannot endlessly continue to support the war effort in Ukraine. It's a very expensive exercise. Europe is already dry on munitions, on military supplies, and they cannot simply keep pondering money into the conflict that doesn't seem to be a winnable war for the Ukrainians. Hence, an attempt to establish some sort of a political dialogue to seek alternative outcome than the one that can be achieved on the battlefield.
It's possibly an unanswerable question, Alexey. Donald Trump says it'll be January the 20th that he ends that war, day one of his second presidency. Whether it's day one or not, do you see the eastern part of Ukraine that is partially occupied by Russia as eventually disappearing from Ukrainian control?
Well, I cannot possibly see that the Russians would agree to anything less. They would probably demand more because, according to the Russian constitutions, parts of Ukraine that currently occupy are now considered to be parts of Russian territory, and they are not fully under Russia's control. So, if anything, Putin will probably demand secession of more of Ukrainian territory. Plus, he would probably talk about some sort of a buffer zone in the near future. So, the view that somehow Russia would agree to return back to the boundaries of 1991, something that Zelensky has been running with since the start of the war, that it would return Crimea, I don't think it's realistic. And I think Putin, according to the Kremlin officials, also emphasized to Scholz that whatever will take place in terms of political conversation, they will have to take into account geopolitical realities on the ground, the situation on the battlefield, meaning whatever Russia controls right now and whatever happens will remain Russia unless Putin wants to ask for more.
Real pleasure to hear your analysis, Alexey. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you.